I feel the number of high-rises or the development coming in Hyderabad might surpass Mumbai by another 5 to 8 years.
Hyderabad has a concept of unlimited FSI.
Yeah.
So coming to cluster redevelopment, where you have played a very major role in formulation of the whole policy as well.
You need the minimum plot criteria, the road width criteria, and then comes the structure. The structures have to be authorized, minimum 30 years of age.
Are there any drawbacks in this scheme?
Because without the right input provided in the tender will fail at the execution stage.
Why each of these different schemes are having different FSI structures?
So there is no one-size-fits-all solution.
Right, because there are certain projects where they are not able to utilize the FSI
Exactly.
also.
Many different parameters.
The premiums in Mumbai are at skyrocket rates. Are they proportionate to the city's growth?
I strongly feel that the premiums in Mumbai are way higher.
The rate of corruption in the real estate industry is quite high compared to other industries in India.
What we miss out is if we can provide all the basic amenities for at least the policy makers. I mean, it takes a person 30 years of their life to make their own house. Why not just provide them in the second year or third year of the job?
What is DCPR and why is a DCPR made for a city? Welcome to another episode of Speaking Real Estate Podcast. So today with us we have Mr. Milind Changani, who is the co-founder of CY Corp and has an experience of about more than 2 decades in the field of architectural design and approval processes. He is joint secretary for PEATA. He is also part of the committee at NAREDCO and MCHR. He plays a very active role in major policy formulations for MCGM and has also played a very major role in DCPR 34. He has a very straightforward approach and deals with transparency and integrity with all the stakeholders involved in any project. It's an honor to host you today here and feels very good to finally do this podcast with you.
Same here.
Normally we start off with the education journey, career journey of our guests. So would like to start off with your education journey.
Oh, I'm actually a Bachelor of Architecture. I did my architecture from Rizvi College of Architecture in Bandra. And I was never into the approval process as such. I worked with firms like Talati Pantaki and I worked for a long time with Hafiz Contractor and was always oriented towards design. I mean, if you see our office, it has some impressions on it. And my mother was an architect. She was a practicing architect, one of the few women architects in Mumbai in the 70s and the early 70s. And she was into the liasoning process. And due to some unfortunate events, she was no more and we took over some projects and that's how the journey began.
Great. So you started off as an architecture and you have kind of set up a benchmark in the whole liasoning field. And if it has to be the best architect in the city, the name comes up, Mr. Milind Changani. So how were you able to create that differentiation and be at that position where you are today?
Well, the journey wasn't easy. When I started my liaising process, probably we were doing 1 or 2 projects a year. The simple approach we kept was be straightforward, be honest. There was no system of undercutting or having any money processed that way. And I think the whole life-round changed for us when our ex-Municipal Commissioner Subodh Kumar came and he brought in the concept of fungible FSI. And it stopped the process of, those 1:3, 1:4. Societies were offered insane amount of percentage and the official areas were very less. And then came, I think, our ex-commissioner, Mr. Ajay Mehta, who brought the ease of doing business. And that's where, young architects like us who were tech savvy, wanted to do our jobs with much more honesty, got a huge platform to showcase our talent. And that's how the journey began.
Great. So moving forward, first talking about the whole DCPR 34. What is DCPR and why is a DCPR made for a city?
So DCPR stands for Development Control, Promotion and Regulation. And it is taken over from the earlier DCR, which is called Development Control Regulation 1991. And one must notice that this new DCPR was every 20 years or 25 years, we need to have a new DCPR in place as per the law itself. And this DCPR made a huge difference to the city of Mumbai. And if you notice, earlier in the DCR 91, there was TDR being used only in suburbs. The new DCPR brought in TDR for use in city as well. Cluster redevelopment got a huge boost because that was the future for the city. cess development got a huge boost. Transit-oriented development came into play. Various other regulations came into play. Zoning for the city was modified. When your plot was reserved, earlier people were hesitant to give their plot for development. But because the benefit was only one time. Today, it's twice in suburbs and 2.5 times in city. So people are very happy to when their plots are reserved. And this was the brainchild of our ex-commissioner Ajay Mehta sir, who formulated the entire DCPR regulation in such a way that each and every stakeholder is benefited. And this is what brought the whole city's development forward.
Understood. What are the key things that DCPR 2034 holds, which one thing you think brought out a very big change?
I think Regulation 33 was one of the biggest introductions. And there were 23 variations in this. It includes development as well as redevelopment schemes in this particular section. This section deals with FAR or FSI, what we call it. And this is where the whole developer fraternity is more keen. So, what will bring us more profits, more FSI, more to sell, more profits. So, a lot of enhancement was brought in under 33.7, 33.9, 33.7A for societies, 33.10 slum redevelopment, the cap of 4 FSI was removed. Combination of schemes was introduced where you can combine two different schemes. Imagine if there are 23 regulations and if you can combine even two regulations, you have more than 500 permutations. Of course, we don't use all 500, but it's available to you. Affordable housing was introduced under 33.11 and 33.20B. So this one regulation 33 made a huge difference on the city's development.
Would like to highlight a few schemes which are majorly used by developers, or these schemes take up a major chunk of the development process. Let's say the SRA or MADA or BMC redevelopment. Can you talk about the top 5 or top few schemes that are majorly?
So, say each kind of regulation is slightly different in terms of city and suburbs. So in suburbs, you have mainly society development. So there you'll have 33.7B. And then, as I said, combination of schemes are allowed. So combination goes with 33.11, which is like a PAP scheme where you give a sharing ratio to the SRA and you get some sale FSI. 33.20B where you do sharing with BMC and you get sale FSI. And in 20B, you can also combine with Regulation 30. So in suburbs, these are the most popular schemes. Then you had tenanted properties in city as well as suburbs. But in city, you had mainly cess properties. 19,000 cess buildings are available out here.
In city itself?
In city itself. It's only city. I mean, suburbs, there were no cess properties.
Okay.
Suburbs, you had tenanted, but they're non-cess properties. So there's 33.7A introduced, which was not there earlier in 91. 33.7 was always there, but it got enhanced. The incentive is enhanced. In fact, it was further enhanced on 8 July 2021, which increased the FSI by another 30%. And it boosted the whole redevelopment process. It made each and every stakeholder benefited. So in 33.7, for example, if you have single plot, the tenants will get 300 square feet plus 5% minimum, or the existing area plus 5%. But if you combine two plots, they will get 8%. If you combine more than 5 plots, they get 15%. So today, and you get incentive on that. So today, the tenants are also happy to come together with other development schemes because they get more benefit, and that's by compulsion. The landlords are happy because they get more revenue share because the incentive is higher. The developer is happy because they get more benefits out of the whole thing. The government is happy because they get more premiums and property tax at the end of the development process. So each and every stakeholder and the citizens benefit because ultimately the revenue collected goes back to the city for its development and infrastructure development.
It is like a win-win situation
It's a win-win
created
situation
for all the stakeholders.
Yeah, so you have 33.5 for MADA land development, 33.10 for SRA development. So these are the top 5-6 schemes you can talk about.
So coming to cluster redevelopment, where you have played a very major role in formulation of the whole policy as well. So can we talk about in brief about the whole cluster redevelopment, as it is one of the most major scheme that holds future for the development of Mumbai as well?
I think all the players such as PEATA, Naredco, MCHI, BDA, CMDWA, all of them played quite an equal role, and a lot of people played good amount of participation in the whole process. And we all realize that, developing single buildings like pencil and having just 5 feet open spaces where you can actually shake hands was actually not useful. Neither the inhabitants were having quality of life, nor the government was benefiting because, you're doing small developments. So after the mill land development, which was the large scale development, which are only 56 mill lands out here, and most of them are already finished, And if you see the city of Mumbai right now, you see the whole skyline which is being developed looks good because of those midland developments. Cluster was the next which needed boost. So the government came up with a fantastic, and they accepted our solutions. They were very open. The municipal commissioners, the government level, all these policy making people out there, they ensured that this particular scheme gets a maximum boost. So the minimum entitlement even to tenants is much higher than any other redevelopment scheme, whether it is 7 or 7B, that is CES or society development. Incentive is much higher. Even MADA gets more surplus area in this particular scheme. The premiums are lower. So when all of this combined, cluster was bound to get the impetus that it needed, and the city for its sustainable development or self-sustainable development or green development, this was the future.
Understood. Can we talk about what are the minimum area requirements for a developer to have to go under the cluster scheme?
So a cluster redevelopment scheme works in city when you have minimum 4,000 square meters of plot area. It can be a single plot, it can be multiple plots. A lot of people have questions, can single plot go for cluster? Yes, it can go for cluster redevelopment scheme. In suburbs, it has to be minimum 6,000 square meters. The road width criteria is preferably 18.3 meters. If not, minimum 12 meters has to be existing, but it should be within 500 meters of 18-meter road. So after you need the minimum plot criteria, the road width criteria, and then comes the structure. The structures have to be authorized, minimum 30 years of age. If they are not 30 years of age, they are not considered. Unless, they're really declared dilapidated or they are owned by MADA, then maybe in certain cases, high power committee might consider them. And then comes the tenancies, where they have to be at least prior to 1995. So if somebody split their flats, we don't want misuse of this regulation. So that's why these regulations have been structured in such a way that your plot, road, building, tenancy are satisfied. And once they are satisfied, the entire FSI pattern can be worked out on those bases.
So let's say there is a cluster development being planned in a certain area. Do the buildings have to be adjoining to each other, or they can be across the road, or maybe across, there's this one building between the two acquired societies, and those two societies are more than 4,000 square meters in city? Can they both go in cluster development where FSI is transferred to another?
So we'll split this question into two parts. First, say there are two separate plots, each of at least 4,000 square meters, and they're across the road. Yes, they can be clubbed as part of one CDS, because CDS allows you, or cluster development scheme allows you, that it can be bounded by roads. Second, if you have a plot of say 6,000 meters or 8,000 meters and a road is passing through it, a proposed new road, and then it's becoming 3,000 each, even that can be redeveloped, provided it was earlier a single year plot. So both ways scenarios are possible. If you have two separate plots, it should each be at least 4,000 square meters. Currently, that is the practice being followed. In future, rules, regulations might have new interpretations, new implementations also.
In cluster redevelopment, do you see any drawbacks or any difficulties? Because everywhere the benefits are very much visible. Are there any drawbacks in this scheme?
So I would actually want to improve it better. I would want, from a policy perspective or from a procedural perspective, we have high power committee, and then every cluster needs to go to the government for approval. Ideally, I would have wanted it to be at high power committee itself. Why do we need a high power committee? Because you see, a cluster affects this at a much macro level than a singular plot development. You need to have the opinion of the Joint Commissioner Police, the MMRDA Commissioner who is having the infrastructure development happening out there, sometimes a MADA because of their surplus being created. So these agencies are required, and they are the decision making. They are the administrative decision making process. To send it to government seems procedural today, and that could possibly be avoided.
Coming to you and wanting to talk about from a society's perspective, where different society members from different societies are coming together. So what key things they should think of before going into a cluster redevelopment project?
So I think whenever society wants to go for a cluster redevelopment project, the first thing they do is appoint a project management consultant. And a lot of times we've seen, a lot of tenders we've seen by project management consultants where the accurate analysis of the data is incomplete from a cluster perspective. For example, they would only look into whether the plot area is satisfied or not, or whether the road width criteria is satisfied, and whether there are any reservations or not. The further conditions, that is, the building has to be existing and authorized. A lot of the time, society has not maintained documents. So they do not have the copies of approved plan and BCC copies, and they expect the project management consultant. Sometimes the project management consultant does not make that effort, and he just uses the data provided by the society, and this goes forward with the tendering process. The second part is the number of members on the records of the society and as per the 1995 original cutoff date which is provided in the cluster. If those are not tallied, again, if the wrong inputs are given to the tenderies, they will fill in the offers as per that. And then when the MADA does not accept them, the whole viability goes for a toss. Then the entire effort of feasibility report, development agreement process, hundreds of negotiation back and forth is leveled out and developments fail. So appointing the right project management consultant, asking him the right question that how much experience does he have in implementation of a cluster redevelopment is very, very critical. Because without the right input provided in the tender will fail at the execution stage.
Understood. So moving forward, now coming to a perspective where there are so many different schemes in the whole DCPR 2034, and each different scheme offers different FSI structures. So should there be a uniform FSI under each scheme? Obviously that is not possible, but why each of these different schemes are having different FSI structures?
So I think one has to understand how the whole past development of Mumbai happened. For example, say in city, the Rent Control Act was brought in, because of which the landlords could not charge actual maintenance cost to the tenants. Slums were mushrooming in the earlier 70s because of political gains, the voter list and all those aspects. And slowly, free housing started being provided. So each and every issue resulted in a different kind of FAR or FSI requirement to make the schemes viable. And that is the reason why a MADA redevelopment scheme has different FSI pattern, a slum redevelopment scheme has different FSI pattern, a CES building redevelopment scheme has a different FSI pattern, because these schemes have to be made viable. And the input required to make viable has been created by our own past, which can't be undone. So what can't be undone has to be resolved in some way or the other. And that's why we have different FSI patterns. So it's very difficult to have a uniform FSI pattern for that matter.
I witnessed a few cases. Let's say there was a society where it had an option of going into a cluster, but still the developer is preferring to go into the redevelopment scheme, and considering different, in the cluster he would get a more FSI benefit, but still he preferred to go into the redevelopment scheme because of certain other benefits, let's say maybe the approval process or licensing process, or maybe some another reason. Why should a developer prefer a scheme that has more FSI always, or no, there could be some other ways of selecting a scheme?
So there is no one size fits all solution. Okay. So every plot has a different set of parameters which needs to be looked into. That is, what is the existing consumption? What is the plot area? If the consumption is very low, if the existing FSI use was very low, then cluster will fail, because it helps a developer when there is more, it's much more denser. Because it's not about FAR, because the additional FAR also has to be shared. So sometimes you do combination like 3311, 3320B or 3312B. Sometimes these schemes become much more beneficial. The other aspect that comes into play is what is our existing land ready reckon rates, what are the sale rates. So one has to work project feasibility under various scenarios. So when we also give a solution to our clients, it cannot be only cluster redevelopment. We have to first evaluate whether regulation 30 with combination of 11, 20B, 12B or any other scenario like public parking lot or 3319 is more feasible versus cluster. So as I said, the permutation combinations are at least 400, 500 if you want to. You have to find the right combination that fits the plot, the right combination that sells from the plot. You can't do 100% commercial development when the market is about residential development. So you have to consider a lot more factors. So as a developer, it's your experience that come into play. What are your strengths in selling? What are your strengths in that area? What does the plot offer? What schemes offer the most optimized, not the maximized solution? So you have to find the optimized solution. It's not about maximization anymore.
Right, because there are certain projects where they are not able to utilize the FSI
exactly.
also.
Many different parameters.
Understood. Now looking this at a combination of various different schemes, are there any things to consider or look up to how to do the combination of these schemes?
Exactly. I mean, as just explained, you need to put in those figures in various permutation combinations available to you. And unless you evaluate them, you can't make a judgment on it. So you make your feasibility report not just one way, but in multiple ways and multiple combination possibles. In each combination, again, how much you want residential, how much you want commercial, again, that has to be evaluated. For commercial, the premiums are double. Whether that's going to fetch you more price, or whether the premiums to make those commercial development are making it unsustainable. So those parameters has to be inputted, and you need to have a strong architectural consultant with you or your in-house BD team to make sure that these multiple parameters come into play. Again, GST is a big challenge. Today, GST is being levied on the rehab component on totality area on market value. I came to know that there are GST probably on premiums being made applicable by the department on RCM basis. And these are the costs which are missing in the input costs. So you need to work out with all the parameters and then decide what works best for you.
Now, there is a cluster redevelopment which is having different plots, which we talked about earlier, that a cluster redevelopment is having an SRA plot, is having a MADA plot, is having a redevelopment plot, is having a CES plot as well. How do you look up to this whole kind of cluster redevelopment?
So the cluster redevelopment itself provides for land pooling of different agencies. You need to bring the NOCs or no objection certificates from the individual landowners. Each one of them can ask either in terms of valuation or number of units or some sort of sharing of the FSI component that needs to be given to them, and in return they give you their no objection certificates. Plus slums, up to 50% of the CDS are allowed to be developed as part of cluster. Reservations, designations, CES, non-CES, any building more than 30 years. This is the best part about cluster redevelopment. No other scheme will allow you to develop multiple land ownerships without amalgamating them as one singular title tenure of a property. No other scheme allows you to develop multiple types of structures into one development scheme. Cluster has taken care of all those challenges and made provisions in the law by following certain protocols, and solutions can be obtained.
Wonderful thing that cluster redevelopment is able to do. I think so, which was missing.
It's quite a future of the city.
Fair. So now the premiums in Mumbai are at skyrocket rates. What do you think about the premiums that are levied on the projects? Are they proportionate to the city's growth?
I strongly feel that the premiums in Mumbai are way, way higher. Proportionate or not is a different scenario, because you see, we can't say that the entire development of the city has to come from only premiums of the redevelopment projects or development of the projects. Infrastructure projects are developed also through funding from taxes being collected, property tax being collected, GST revenues earned by the government, various other parameters. Cities' development premiums, if you compare it even to places like Hyderabad, which is just 500-600 rupees a square feet, in our case, it ranges from 6,000 to 10,000 rupees a square feet. It's actually 1/3 cost of the project. In fact, government is indirectly 1/3 partners with no other input other than giving us permissions. And 1/3 is probably the landowners and the rent and the corpus, and 1/3 is the construction cost. So in terms of costing, 1/3 cost is only premium, which for any city across world makes it slightly unsustainable, and the entire impact comes on the buyers. And today, imagine a generation like you who wants to buy a flat for yourself, and the cost of Bombay keeps rocketing up and up. You're not going to find it sustainable. Yes, the government made some efforts for the last 3 years. They've not increased the ready reckoner rate. They brought in, during the COVID pandemic, the 50% discount on the premiums. They brought in the stamp duty reduction. And they realized that their revenues increased 3x. This is exactly my point, that if you reduce the revenues, construction gets a boost, your revenues gets a boost. So you have to see the overall picture. I mean, people feel that, they're benefiting the developers, and that's why you should not reduce it. I mean, there's always that living room discussion, अरे government ने policy निकाला, developer को फायदा हो जाएगा. What they don't realize that end में उनको ही खरीदने का है flat. And the cost will come down if these costs are brought down.
Do you think other cities other than Mumbai in India having this benefit of not huge premiums will help the other cities boost more compared to Bombay in future?
Just compare other cities like Hyderabad, Mangalore, Indore. I feel the number of high-rises or the development coming in Hyderabad might surpass Mumbai by another 5 to 8 years. I mean, that's a huge blow to a city like Mumbai, which had an infra, which already had so much development happening and getting defeated by a city which is just started construction last 7-8 years.
Hyderabad has a concept of unlimited FSI.
Yeah.
That
They have
place,
very simple rules. Keep 20-meter open space. But you try to understand. Hyderabad is a greenfield development majorly. And
Okay.
Mumbai is a brownfield development. We have our own set of challenges. What we need to do is bring down the cost of development. And that's how we'll be able to get back to the momentum.
understood. We are talking about how Bombay had a huge infrastructure, is also having infrastructure, but is the infrastructure's growth is at the pace of the same development space of Bombay?
So I feel there's a lot of infrastructure development. I mean, if you see Coastal Road, Trans Harbour Link, Metro, Mono, a lot of effort is being made on public and private transportation system. But there is a need for much more smarter interconnectivity. So if you go to a city like Japan, it will tell you if you get down at the bus at this moment, the next train is available at this, the next cab is available at out this at this time, and all of them are interconnected through a singular app. That's a smart city building. We need interconnectivity between various transportation. We need more public transportation. I think even a city like Mumbai needs more walking space for pedestrians, cycling space for for citizens. That all is still missing. In fact, we had the cycling track coming up over the pipeline, but it's again shelved for some political reasons. Somewhere, politicians after the elections should get over the process of infighting and promote cities' development.
So currently seeing the huge traffic in Mumbai and also taking hours to reach from one point to another, and such all huge infrastructure projects that are going on are might change the way of transportation in the future. But do you have anything to say on or advice for the government to keep up with the infrastructure development pace?
I just said that infrastructure is being developed, and I'm no expert on infrastructure overall. But as a planner for the city, what can be done by the government is to promote more mixed-use development. All over the world, we have mixed-use development where you have commercial, residential, hotels, offices, all on the same tower. Today, for a city like Mumbai, those regulatory changes need to be brought in because we do not want people to keep traveling from one point A to point B. If you can transport from within the same tower, it makes it much more easier. We have to formulate new rules, or we need to be much more flexible to allow mixed-use development. And that might also help to reduce the load on the infrastructure that's coming up.
Shifting the discussion a little bit, the approval process in Mumbai is a very tedious and a time-consuming process compared to other cities in the whole world. What differences you can say or talk about the differences in approval process in other countries?
The Mumbai redevelopment process or the approval process that has been brought in under ease of doing business has improved a lot. In fact, we used to rank 142nd in 2014 on the ease of doing business. Today, we are 63rd since 2019. And we have maintained that position for a long time now. And that's a huge jump. I mean, a lot of effort has been brought in to bring transparency into the field under ease of doing business and bringing in auto DCR and all that. But understand the challenges compared to the other cities like Singapore, Hong Kong, South Korea, Denmark, New Zealand, where the approval process is much more transparent and predictable. What do we mean by predictable? We have something called concessions. So we've made rules that you need to have so much open space, but you can get lower open space by paying premiums. Now that concession is standard, and we call it 6B as a regulation. The best part is 9 out of 10 projects have the same concessions. Why not just make it into a rule? If you standardize the concessions to a lot of extent, the approval process will reduce. The other big challenge is the number of department NOCs that we need to bring in. For example, coastal management zone, MOEF from an environmental perspective, high-rise committee, high-power committee. We have mono, metro, railway NOCs. Why don't we just standardize the rules and bring in a single window application as part of the regulatory process where we don't need to go to so many departments? I mean, how difficult can it be? I mean, all of them ultimately are approving, right? Under certain pretext. Make those pretexts as rules. As simple as that. But we do not want to do that because sometimes we get more premiums out of it, or sometimes we always say it's case-to-case basis. But 9 out of 10 cases have a similar parameter and it can be standardized. And if that is done, I think we may jump from 63rd to the top 5 much easier and will also bring down the cost of development process.
Let's hope this happens soon enough. So, what advice would you give to the government in making the city more beautiful?
I think when the government started, they from DCR, that is Development Control Regulation of 91, they brought something called GDCR, the General Development Control Regulation. And then it got transformed to DCPR, Development Control and Promotion Regulation. But in the process, the GDCR had some unique features of artistic development of the city. For example, we had every corner plot had to leave a part of the corner for an artwork installation. I think that needs to be brought in. We have to learn from something which has already been done in the past by the British and during the British era, like the DN Road. We had the covered promenade. We have rains. We have sun. We have much harsher climate. If we have covered walkways, it will help the citizens to go through that, and we can provide FSI benefits. There are countries where the open spaces between buildings are used for public. If we can promote more public use of private space, it's going to enhance the way the city looks. The transit-oriented development recently introduced does have some features to do that, but it is still to be implemented. So if the government can bring in much more incentives to make private spaces as public spaces, I think we will double, triple the amenities for the citizens of Mumbai.
We talked about how the government or can help in making the city more beautiful and the outer areas of Mumbai. But talking about the buildings, there are hardly or very few structures or buildings in Mumbai that are iconically very beautiful or people around the world would want to see, such as the building Burj Khalifa in Dubai. How can we make that happen in Mumbai to have structures like Burj Khalifa or many such structures in the whole world where people want to look at those structures?
So I think there's no lack of talent pool of architects or designers or even developers to make those kind of buildings out here. What is the missing part is the liberalization of allowing those features out here. And BMC and all the organizations like PEATA, MCH, Redite did come together and has formulated a policy for iconic buildings for the city of Mumbai. And it has been put forward to the government. Hopefully, post-elections, we see the light of it. And in this particular policy, a committee is made where you want a particular feature like the one in Singapore for the Marina Sand Bay or the Taipei 101 or across the world, we see so many, the Burj Khalifa, the cantilevered helipad. The helipads are not allowed in Mumbai for defense reasons. So somewhere we need to bring in rules and regulations which allow these features to be given free of FSI. And a committee which is formed takes a very honest approach. It can have ex-commissioners or legal eagles or even top professionals from architects to be part of the committee and allow those features free of FSI. So more and more architects get zeal to do those iconic buildings. And it's not going to make only fantastic towers. It's going to promote tourism. It's going to create an identity. See how Petronas did for KL or how Marina Sand Bay did for Singapore. And once you have more tourism, you have much more business for all across the city.
So real estate industry, people thinking that it is a very flamboyant industry and people think developers make a lot of money. And so the rate of corruption in the real estate industry is quite high compared to other industries in India. How can we help in reducing that and making it more transparent?
लगता है तू मरवाएगा मुझे मेरे profession में. But I would discuss on the aspect of how to reduce corruption. And let us understand, for each citizen of Mumbai, those citizens are only engineers, those citizens are only, on the policy making aspect. And what is missing? For each person, we used to say we need roti, kapda, makan. Do these people have free housing provided by the government? They have subsidized food provided, like army has for their people, they'll have housing, they'll have subsidized canteens to provide food. What we miss out is if we can provide all the basic amenities for at least the policy makers. You have redevelopment schemes already available for staff housing, for various housing. We must focus on providing housing for the conservancy workers, for the entire BMC team, for the police teams. Once you solve those issues for them, which is the biggest issue in a city like Mumbai, that housing, it takes a person 30 years of their life to make their own house. Why not just provide him in the second year or third year of his job, once he's permanent out of the job? Provide subsidized canteens for food for various aspects. Once you solve these kind of issues, which are the basic necessities in life, then stringent laws in place can be brought in where corrupts are punished. And then they realize that, that if I have my basics in place, what else do I need for? Slowly and steadily, transparency and catering to these needs of our own people will help probably solve corruption. I don't know if I've answered your question, but probably this might be one of the solutions.
Helping those policymakers or people who are helping the city be clean, providing them houses and places that would help them live a better life. How will that be possible? Will the government has to introduce various schemes for incentivizing developers to make that happen?
The current framework already has a lot of provisions. For example, in cluster redevelopment, even on a private land, MCGM or MADA can insist additional tenements for themselves, which can be granted for not just project affected people, but also for their staff or for different reasons. Plus, they have 33(2), which is for development of staff quarters, and they should allow more public-private participation. In fact, if BMC makes a list of all the land bank that they hold and makes a master plan for the development and sets a 20-year guideline for solving those issues, they will achieve it in that timeline.
You are secretary of PEATA. So, what is PEATA and what are the organization's objectives?
PEATA is Practicing Engineers, Architects and Town Planners Association. It's one of the only organizations where you have engineers, architects and town planners coming under one roof. And PEATA's objective is to help its members, guide them in terms of rules, regulations, represent to the government what are the issues faced by them, whether it can be liaising, designing or any other sorts of challenges that they face. And we have also developers and other ex-engineers part of our organization as donor members. And a lot of effort is done by PEATA for bringing the industry transparency, policy formulation and ease of doing business.
How has PEATA benefited you?
I think when I started my career, I was introduced to PEATA, and what I noticed that there's a lot of harmony where the seniors are wanting to teach the juniors on understanding of the rules and regulations. PEATA conducts regular workshops, seminars for all its members free of cost. This is the only organization, if you see most organizations will have conferences and they'll charge you for it. We charge zero. We have sponsorship which help us fund these workshops and seminars. And these workshops and seminars help younger generations to understand the rules and regulations and be a part of the planning of Mumbai.
Anybody can attend it or it has to be a member of...
Absolutely. No. Anybody can attend it. There is no cost to non-members or members.
Fair. So, coming to ender part where would like your advice to major stakeholders in the industry. First, coming to the developers, what would you advise to various developers to helping their building, their surrounding more beautiful?
I think the biggest issues developers face is, whenever you say, "Arey developer aisa hoga, waisa hoga," because the reputation built by certain sections of the developer has maligned a larger industry itself. But what we don't realize, by the introduction of RERA and all the new projects, they are not stuck. The stuck projects are the ones in the past. But what the RERA did is brought in transparency, brought in honesty, brought in accountability, and prevented money to be used on different projects. And this was needed as a self-certification process by the developers themselves. The second big aspect, I think what they should promote is a green and a sustainable development. In fact, I feel the government needs to do much more on this particular subject, where they need to provide more incentives for developers promoting green and sustainable development, whether in tax benefits, FSI benefits, or any other kind of benefits. So, thinking of city first will help them make a better project, a better lifestyle, and a better brand, which help them command a better pricing naturally. Today, we've all realized that the brands are commanding 30% higher than the other development in the vicinity. So, making a brand for yourself, doesn't matter small or big, you can make a brand for yourself by executing projects and finishing the project the way you showed it in your brochure.
Understood. your advice to your colleagues in the architectural industry?
Be honest. Do your best that you can. Ensure that your client does a green and sustainable development. Ensure that you think of your citizens of Mumbai as well, not just of the development potential and everything other aspects. If you're planning a high-rise building, if you're building a tall building, make sure you plan your services and other aspects much cleaner, neater, with a very fail-safe mechanism. One needs to be holistic in nature to implement a redevelopment process.
And what would you advise to the younger generation who are about to start their career?
Similar advice, be honest, be honest, be honest. Because that's where you will make long-term goals come into reality.
Now, wanting to talk about a little bit else apart from the real estate industry, you like trekking a lot and you go to a lot of treks. So, want to know a little bit about your experience of trekking.
So, I think COVID made a lot of big difference. Prior to COVID, I was almost 120 kilos. And post-COVID, I was at my farmhouse and, we did a lot of webinars, seminars. But we did not get the fancy food or eating out and all those. And that made me a much more healthy lifestyle. And I've realized that the healthy lifestyle improved on an overall basis. Trekking, setting goals for yourself is very important to do next. Whether it is trekking, whether it is ice wall climbing, whether it is rock climbing, whether it is diving, which all of these activities I like to do. All of them are like goal setters. And the moment you set a goal and you achieve it, you feel a sense of satisfaction, and that makes you calmer and much more cooler in your work process as well.
You like reading?
I don't read non-fictional, other fictional things. I like reading more and more technical subjects.
DCPR?
No, not just DCPR. I'm much more inclined on every aspect of development, whether it is tall buildings, whether it is what are the rules, regulations happening in different countries. Like, for example, you have the CTBO, Council for Tall Building and Urban Habitat. I really like to see all their studies, case for studies that they have conducted on how buildings fail, how firefighting work, how firefightings fail, what are the reasons for fires, or all those technical aspects. I mean, every aspect of the construction of a building now fascinates me. And I like to understand each and every fail-safe mechanism to make myself better and better into it.
I think so. You gave us the whole number of topics for our another podcast.
All right, that'll be great.
So it was a great session where we talked about various different schemes.
Thank you, and all your viewers as well. Thanks a lot for having me here.
And it was indeed a good where it was all about making the city more beautiful, understanding schemes in a short, brief way, and what all everybody can do to make Mumbai a better place to live.
Absolutely.
Thank you for being a part of this.
Thank you, everyone. Great.